Designed to help you fall asleep. Find us on snoozecast.com and follow us on social media and wherever you listen to podcasts. Our current goal is to get to 100 reviews on the podcast app to help new listeners find us. If you haven't subscribed and written a review yet, please do. Thank you to everyone who's taken the time to do so. Please know that we read every review, and we can't tell you how happy it makes us to know we're helping you get to sleep. This episode is brought to you by Ice Flowers. Tonight, we'll read an excerpt about traveling to a high alpine winter resort from a book called Winter Sports in Switzerland, written by E.F. Benson in 1913. Benson was an English novelist, biographer, memoirist, archaeologist, and short story writer. Let's get cozy. Close your eyes. Relax your body into the softness of your bed. Now, take a few deep breaths. High alpine resorts in winter are a conjuring trick of a glorious and luminous kind. Our common sense, based on experience, tells us that ice is cold, but is melted by heat, and that snow is wet, and that unless you put on a greatcoat when the thermometer registers frost, you will feel chilly, and that if you frequently fall down in the snow, you will be wet through, and if you do not change your clothes when you return home, you'll catch a cold. All these things are quite obvious, and he who does not grant them as premises to whatever conclusion we may happen to base them on is clearly not to be argued with, but soothed and comforted, like a child, or taken care of like a lunatic. But high alpine winter resorts give, apparently, ocular disproof of all these obvious statements, and those who go out to these delectable altitudes in favorable seasons see, which is ocular evidence, every day and all day the exact opposite of these primitively simple prepositions regularly and continually taking place. They sit in the sun when they are tired of skating and see that though a torrid luminary beats down on the frozen surface, burning and browning the faces of their friends, the ice remains perfectly dry and unmelted. They trudge through snow and find that they are not wet. They see the thermometer marking anything up or down to 30 degrees of frost, and go out coatless and very likely hatless, and are conscious only of an agreeable and bracing warmth. They go skiing, and all day are smothered in snow, and yet return dry and warm and comfortable to their hotels. and do not catch any cold whatever. Shakespeare once made an allusion of some kind, I cannot look through all of his plays to find it, about hot ice, meaning to employ a nonsensical expression. But it is the most striking testimonial to the magnificence of his brain that all he ever wrote meant something, although, as in this instance, he designed it not to. For without doubt, he was alluding to what appears to occur at St. Moritz or Murin. I love the landing on the friendly shores of France, the waiting while the ship is reluctantly coaxed, sidling up to the pier, the hustle to get through the custom house and enter the warm, well-lit train. All is strange and new and delightful. The engine of unaccustomed build and outlandish voice, the gray upholstered compartments with their hot carpeted floors, the restaurant car with bottle-filled racks where presently I sit, part of a moving pageant of eating and drinking, as we shriek through stations and scour with ever-increasing velocity through the darkness of a stormy night. At Leon, mysterious jugglings take place. Another string of carriages is slowly shunted onto our train, to the accompaniment of many cries of warning and encouragement and wavings of lanterns. And the buffers come home with a soft thud. We cast off our tail, lizard-like, which is hauled away to travel divergently to Basel, and soon we are thundering on again by the more direct route to Bern. I do not wake until we are actually slowing down to enter Bern, that city so justly famous for its bears, its president of this delectable republic, and its terrace from which the eager tourist vainly scans the impenetrable clouds which invariably screen from his view all possible glimpses of the mountains of the Oberland. Whenever I arrive at Bern, it is always a gray, chilly morning, just above freezing point, so that the icy streets are half slush. At first, this used to depress me with ominous forebodings of a thaw at the higher altitudes. Now I know that all the winter through it is always just thawing at Bern, and that the sky there always is heavily beclouded. I think a sunny, frosty morning there would cause me some inconsiderable anxiety, for it would imply a complete upset of climatic conditions, and midsummer might be expected to hold its abhorred sway on the heights. So, in perfect equanimity, I climb back again into our train, heated to the temperature of the second hottest room in a Turkish bath, and we jog in more leisurely fashion through the half-frozen villages towards the lake of Thun. These villages are mainly composed of houses taken from the larger-sized boxes of toys, with stones fastened down on their wood shingle eaves to prevent their roofs blowing away, and with staircases clearly built for ornament and completely impractical, climbing up the outside of their walls. Stations and banks and hotels seem to be constructed with a view to moderate permanence. The rest are clearly so made that they can be taken up and planted down somewhere else. Then, as we emerge on the edges of the lake, higher hills begin to tower across its steely gray levels, and rifts in the clouds that shroud their heads and hunched shoulders show glimpses of sun that shine on the whiteness of snow. Mile after mile, we pursue a meandering way along the shores and thread the darkness of horse tunnels whose lips are fringed with dripping icicles, and the sense of something coming, something high and clear, begins to grow. Though in front, where Interlaken lies, a veil of gray-blue mist is interspersed between us and that which, I know, soars above it. The clouds are beginning on all sides to become unraveled, like woolwork pulled out. And through the rents and torn edges, gleams of turquoise sky are seen. High up climb serrated rims of rock, cut vividly clear against the blue and fringed with aspiring pines. Higher yet, where the boldest of these brave vegetables can find no footing, further ridges appear austere and empty and gleaming. Yet these are but the outlying buttresses and ramparts of the great towers at the base, of which they lean and cluster. Tonight we shall sleep in an eyrie far above them, and far above us yet we'll watch the unscaled precipices of the great range, over the edge of which the unheeding stars climb and swim into sight all night long, pouring the golden dew of their shining upon forest and glacier, until the snows are rosy with dawn. We paused in Interlaken Central Station to draw breath after our lakeside amble. Here the snow lay crisp and hard-trodden in the streets, but overhead the gutters gurgled, and the eaves of houses dripped with its melting in this brilliant morning. No shred of cloud was left in all the shining heavens, and like the flanks of a galloped horse, the pine-clad hillsides steamed in the sun. And then the miracle. As we steamed forth again to the eastern station, a long valley lying between two wooded hills opened out, and there, clear in the light of the young day, and white with virgin snows and blue with precipices of ice, and set in the illimitable azure, rose the Queen of Mountains, the maiden, the Jungfrau, peaked and domed and pinnacled in ineffable crystal. The Jungfrau is, and will always be, my mistress among mountains, as she was when I first saw her at the age of 12. One mistake I have made in my conduct towards her, and that was 10 years later when I climbed her. And yet who could tell she would prove so tedious and heavy, not in hand, but in foot? For I approached the lady of my adoration from the Concordia hut, and instead of feasting my eyes at every step on her queenly, gracious carriage and maiden slenderness, I found that the closer I got to her, the more she appeared round-shouldered, not to say humpbacked. In addition, a quantity of fresh snow had fallen, and we had a long, tiresome, and utterly unexciting trudge, a hot and stodgy affair. I had imagined that ventures and perils would have to be encountered for this wooing and winning of her, with balancings and poisings on stairways of precipitous ice, and needles of pinnacled rock. Instead, she had to be solidly and laboriously and dully approached. It was like wooing some great bolster or gigantic cow. For a little while after that, I cared nothing for her. She was a mature and silent barmaid of vast proportions. But gradually her charm and enchantment cast their spell over me again, the dissolution of which I intend never to risk in the future, unless I approach her by a more hazardous and daring route. To those who approach her dully, she gives herself dully. The more daring wooer she may perhaps kill, but she does not bore him. But the wonder of her, when seen through clear air, when the brilliant winter sky around her head from the entrance to this valley that leads up to the Lauterbrunnen, up it we steamed in the little angry, rattling, snorting train, which cut itself in half to take some of its aspiring contents to Grindelwald on the left, and others among whom I numbered myself to Wengen and to Muren. By the side of our way ran a turbulent mountain stream fed by the glaciers of the Oberland, too swift to freeze altogether, but with its backwaters and sheltered reaches covered over with lids of ice. For all its glacier birth steam rose from it in the icy air that hovered in shaded places, and the alders and hazels that hung over it were thickly encrusted with the marvelous jewelry of the hoarfrost, spiked and refoliaged in wondrous winter growth, with tendrils and scrolls of minutest diamond dust. Narrower grew the valley, steeper and taller the wooded hills that overhung it, till at last we reached Lauterbrunnen, close to which the Staubach, most amazing of all waterfalls, leaps a clear 800 feet from the edge of the high plateau shelf, which skirts along the mountainside onto the rocks below. Even in summer, when the melting of the snows that feed the stream make it of far greater volume from when the stricture of frost is on it, the water, poured as from a jug spout, disintegrates in its fall, so that it reaches the valley more in wreaths of mist than in solid water, and collects again from the dripping rocks. While in winter, its diminished volume is further spent in the manufacture of the huge icicles that fringe the edge of its leaping place, and hang in great streamers, the beard and hair, you would say, of the very Frost King himself, who sits at ease on this precipitous throne. Parallel with the Staubach, and up a hillside, which appears hardly less sheer than the precipice itself, runs the funicular railway which leads to the Muren Plateau. At first sight, it seems as if it must be meant for a practical joke, constructed by humorous engineers to astonish the weak minds of travelers, and, though practical from the point of view of a joke, to be perfectly impractical as a means of conveyance, its steepness is that of disordered images seen in a dream. And it was with a sense of utter incredulity that I first took my place in one of the small wooden compartments and was locked in by an apparently sane and serious conductor. He blew a whistle, or a bell sounded, just as is done on real lines of traffic, and immediately afterwards we began to ascend that impossible line of rails, sauntering with smooth and steady progress up that ridiculous precipice. More amazing still, we soon observed a similar car sauntering steadily down it, just strolling down, even as we were strolling up. We met, we passed, and I had a vision of passengers smoking and chatting, as if nothing in the least remarkable was happening, and imminent death did not await us all. But more remarkable things than that were happening. Upwards from the valley, we climbed on this Jacob's ladder that reached, if not to heaven, to very heavenly places. Pine woods and rocks melted away below, streaming quietly downwards. Presently we were level with the top of the towering precipice from which the Staubach was discharged, and presently that too was left below. But higher as we mounted there climbed with us, in fresh unfoldings of glaciers and peaks and glittering snowfields, the great range of the Oberland. New peaks met heaven in snow, too steep and windswept to allow a vestige of snow to lie there, pointed arrow-like to the tops above them. Eiger, Monk, Silberhorn, and Jungfrau towered glittering just across the Lauterbrunnen valley from which we had come, and as we sidled along the upland shelf on which Mürren stands, gradually the whole range spread itself out in tremendous rampart, radiant, rejoicing, and austere. For foreground was this narrow ledge of white fields dotted here and there with cattle chalets, and pines scattered singly or in companies, all wearing plumes and tippets of snow that made their foliage seem a black blot in the sunlight. And soon the congregation of village roofs appeared, and Mürren was bathed and basking in sunshine, drowned, so to speak, in the sparkling champagne of the invigorating winter morning, and the intoxication of the high places, an entrancing vintage of oxygen and ice and sun, invaded limb and sinew and brain. It is supposed by those who have never seen the infinite variety of forms into which frost converts mist and dew and all manner of water, that there must be a monotony in those vast expanses of snow and ice. They figure to themselves the depressing spectacle of snow as it usually appears in England, smooth and soft and wet, and too close a cousin to slush not to be tainted with a family resemblance. The image called up by ice is a gray surface in which are embedded dead leaves, twigs, and stones thrown onto it by boys for purposes not clearly understandable. while all they know of hoarfrost is an evanescent decoration that occurs at the edges of ditches and on lawns when tea is being made in the morning, and disappears as soon as the poached eggs, leaving the grass soaking and dripping. But as is crystal to soap, so are those radiant congealations of the high Alps to the same as seen beneath gray skies and on luminous days. Here, if snow has fallen, as sometimes happens while wind is blowing, it is driven into all manner of curving wave crests and undulations. Then, when the fall is over, the sky clears again. A night of frost hardens and congeals the outlines, and the trees wear fine feathers and plumes of whiteness. As the snowfall packs with its own weight, there grows on the surface of the fields a crust, half snow, half ice, covered with dazzling, minute crystals. During the fall of the snow, there has been moisture in the air, and often on that brilliant morning that succeeds the fall, the air is full of minute, frozen particles of water that sparkle like the old-fashioned glass decoration on Christmas cards, so that one walks through a shining company of tiniest diamond fireflies, and the frozen surface of snow reflects the wonderful azure and gold of sun and sky. And here in the blaze it lies white beneath a vivid yellow. There in the shade a dim blue permeates it. The one more night of frost covers every sprig and fir needle with amazing spikes and fern-like sprays of minute crystal. Wondrous are their growths, more particularly if some cold mist comes up from the valleys. Then, with a craze for decoration, almost ludicrous, you shall see your friends with hair and eyebrows bedecked with these jewels, each separate hair wearing its frozen